Well folks, we've officially made it to the end of another year. And as always, I like to take this time to reflect on the many virtual worlds that I spent the majority of my time in, as opposed to, well, touching grass. The year of 2025 was overall pretty consistent and a very busy year for game releases. Starting off strong with games like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Split Fiction, alongside the surprise underdog Expedition 33. We saw a major new console released in the summer, then followed up with highly anticipated games like Silksong, Hades 2, Silent Hill F, Ghost of Yotai, Kirby Air Riders. My god, who has the time for all these releases, and why do you all release them at the same exact time? Last year I dubbed 2024 as the year of RPGs, but if there was a trend that I saw this year, I would say this was the year of kart racers. Mario Kart World, Sonic Racing, and Kirby Air Riders, there was a lot of these to choose from this year. But anyway, I'm going to give some bite-sized reviews on every game that I played this year, and we'll be avoiding any major spoilers with any of these titles. Then towards the end, I'll also announce my personal favorite game of the year for 2025. So without further ado, let's start off with the slow month of January. I finished my playthrough of Phoenix Wright Spirit of Justice as part of the very lengthy Apollo Justice trilogy. It does suffer some of the same complaints I had with Dual Destinies, specifically that the dialogue can get pretty long-winded in certain sections, and the multiple protagonists that you cycle through can feel like point-of-view whiplash at times. However, I think they did a much better job at keeping the central themes and the overall story much more focused in this entry. I also really like that they expand on the backstories of the characters we've come to know and love from the previous games, which I definitely appreciated, and it felt like Dual Destinies was kind of afraid to do that. My biggest complaint has to be the spiritual seances. They were a fun distraction in the first case, but as they got more convoluted throughout later cases, these really frustrated the hell out of me. Phoenix Wright is at its best when it's being logical, and I just feel like the seances didn't really reflect any of that. But I digress. I think we can all agree that the newer titles have their flaws, but this felt like a step in the right direction. Maybe Ace Attorney 7 will come soon? Maybe? Next, I took it upon myself to play the original Resident Evil. No, not that one. The much prettier GameCube version. And I had a lot of fun with this. For a game that was remade in 2002, it holds up surprisingly well once you turn the tank controls off. The graphics still look great, and the overall atmosphere of wandering through this giant mansion is truly unmatched. Some of the puzzles can get pretty obtuse, which unfortunately seems to be a trend across every game in this specific genre. Alongside that, I had to constantly keep going to save rooms because I never had any room in my inventory. Again, it's just kind of the nature of classic survival horror in these times. My only other complaint, not necessarily with this game, but with the genre as a whole, is if I take a 2-day break to do something else, a lot of times I do feel completely lost and can never remember what I was supposed to do to progress the story. Either way, after playing almost every single entry that came out after this, I'm glad I finally got to experience the original. Technically. Last but not least, I ended the month with... You guys thought I was done with this series, but That's right, episode Aigis came out the previous year for my favorite game of 2024, so you know I had to play it. First off, I do want to address the elephant in the room. I don't condone the way Atlus released this DLC, specifically the fact that you have to buy the Season Pass, which includes all the skins and cosmetics in order to actually experience the new story elements. I was able to get it on sale, which certainly stifled the blow a bit, but like, come on Atlus, just release the DLC by itself. I don't need any of that cosmetic BS. Either way, what do I feel about the actual story DLC? I mean, it's alright. It adds a bit more side content than the original, which I definitely appreciated, but overall this is still pretty grind heavy when it comes to the actual battling system. But hey, at least they added a new song. Ooh, yeah! Ooh, that's smooth! Yeah. Overall, if you aren't a huge fan of the gameplay loop, I can't really recommend this because it can get really repetitive when you're essentially doing the same thing for 30 hours straight. Just when you thought I was done glazing Atlus, you thought wrong, because the month of February I finally got the chance to play their new game, Metaphor ReFantazio. And personally, I have a pretty love-hate relationship with this game. First off, I think Atlus nailed the fantasy setting and overall world building of this new universe. The themes of systemic racism and inequality really hits close to home and feels super relevant with what's happening in the real world today. But my biggest complaint by far is the combat system. They marketed the gameplay as being similar to Persona, except in this instance you get the freedom to choose what each character's persona, or in this game they're called archetypes, get to choose. However, if you want to see each character's big, awesome mastery archetype at the end of the game, it restricts you to only pursuing those select few archetypes. The most egregious example being Haizame, who needs to master the Thief, Gunner, and Merchant archetypes, which already have an extensive leveling tree, and if you're not actively paying attention to these classes, you'll have to grind battles extensively to get that mastery archetype. I also found myself running into multiple difficulty spikes throughout the campaign. It's obvious the developers knew things like this would happen because they give you a button to completely reset battles, but honestly, I just kept finding that if I didn't bring the right party members to some of these fights, I would have to reset the game completely in order to go back and bring the correct party members. Stuff like this had me constantly getting aggravated because when I wasn't dealing with that, this game was an almost perfect experience. I would love to see another game in this setting, but with the battle and archetype system more fleshed out, because this is what really holds the game back in my opinion. In the month of March, I started playing the original Shadow the Hedgehog, along with Sonic x Shadow Generations. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I did write a whole video essay on both of these games, but to quickly reiterate, love the edgy atmosphere and dad rock of the original, but I found the core gameplay pretty wonky, especially for a modern Sonic game. Sonic x Shadow Generations, however, really surprised me with how fluent and responsive the gameplay was. It's honestly my favorite modern Sonic game that has come out since Sonic Unleashed. Moving on to the month of April, I wanted to revisit the Link's Awakening remake that came out in 2019. I talked a bit about this in my More Games That Pair Well with Weed video, but when this initially came out, I just don't think I was in the right headspace for it. I remember being quite frustrated with a lot of the puzzles in the early parts of the game, but mixed with some of that wacky tobacco, I took some more time to soak in the world around me and didn't have as much trouble with a lot of those early puzzles. I've come to really appreciate this game for what it is, as just a really weird take on Zelda that constantly walks the line of what's real and what's not. It's easy to see the influence this took from Twin Peaks, and I love it all the more for that. This month I also started playing Alien Isolation, a game that's been hyped up to me by multiple horror game enthusiasts. And I'd say the hype is warranted, but it's in no way a perfect 10 out of 10 experience. Let's start with the good aspects. The AI of the actual alien is amazing. In fact, it's almost scary how smart this thing is. When I first encountered him, I kept hiding in the same locker and using my motion tracker to see where the alien was. And over again, every time I left that locker, he would immediately jump out and stab me to death. Which at first was extremely frustrating, until I learned that the AI is smart enough to know that I would hide in that specific locker every time and would camp out there until I got impatient and left. Experiences like these are the true genius of this game. The actual alien itself is so smart that you have to constantly rethink strategies to try and outmaneuver it. But when you're not playing these cat and mouse scenarios with the alien, that's where I did find that the overall gameplay loop got really repetitive. It essentially just boiled down to sneaking from one area of the ship to the next, and that's the exact same thing you do for roughly 15 hours straight. The combat scenarios with the androids and humans also weren't really my favorite, and just generally felt pretty janky whenever I tried to engage with them. Overall, I think they definitely nailed the atmosphere of this universe, and the actual AI of the alien is so freaking cool. I'm happy they got another chance to make a sequel to this, because I think they can make something really special here. During the month of May, I picked up Darkest Dungeon for the very expensive price of $2. And boy howdy, this is one of those games that took me through a roller coaster of emotions. At first I hated it, specifically the fact that my characters were getting destroyed by the brutal RNG system that this game employs. Then as I started to learn more about the overall stats of characters and learn new strategies on how to heal stress, I became absolutely obsessed with this game. Then towards the end of the campaign, I want to say about roughly 50 hours in, I felt the game was getting pretty repetitive and I was just ready for the experience to end. My biggest complaint by far has to be the amount of time you need to grind in this game to get characters to their final level. There's nothing more discouraging than spending 5 hours trying to level up one of your characters, all for them to go insane and get one-shotted by the more challenging enemies that appear in the final dungeons. The game gives you some ways to try and speed up the leveling process, but I found it was pretty largely inconsistent. I'm all for challenging games, but the real challenge that comes from this one is not knowing the new enemies or the new areas that are introduced to you. Once you learn the enemies and the overall mechanics, the majority of the challenge is gone, and that's what makes it all the more frustrating when you have to spend literal hours trying to get your classes where they need to be with leveling. I love the art style and the extremely dark atmosphere of this game, but yeah, if I didn't already spend 50 hours in this, I probably would not have felt compelled to finish it. In the month of June, Donkey Kong Bonanza came out, but I didn't have a Switch 2, and I didn't really feel like buying one just for Donkey Kong Bonanza. So I ended up doing the next best thing and replaying Mario Odyssey. You don't need me to tell you this, but this game is so friggin' good. It's on par with how grand the previous titles are, and I just love how much inspiration it takes from Mario 64. I will say though that it's certainly not perfect. There are some serious BS moons to collect in this game. Like, Nintendo, what were we thinking with the jump rope and the volleyball moons? Like, come on, man! Besides that, this is a near perfect game, and the soundtrack consistently makes me emotional. It's so good. This month also saw the release of the highly anticipated Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4. Toby Fox, bro, you never fail to impress. Both of these chapters were so different from what we've come to expect from the previous ones, and really I just feel like this man can do no wrong. I can't talk too much about these without spoiling certain aspects of each chapter, but I just can't get over the characters, the battle system, and the music. I have no negative things to say here. Just if you're listening, Toby, keep doing what you're doing because you are shaping what may be one of the greatest RPGs of all time. In the month of July, I picked up Doom: The Dark Ages, and this game fucking rocks. Bethesda is one of the few companies that's really keeping the single-player, first-person shooter genre alive and still exciting. I really liked how different this one felt compared to Doom Eternal. If you ever played first-person shooter games of old like Serious Sam, this game feels very similar and almost like the spiritual successor to that type of horde enemy gameplay. The only complaint I have is when you're up against bosses, the game forces you to use the new parrying system against those enemies to the point where if you're not actively parrying them, you're not actually doing any damage to them. But luckily Bethesda added a ton of customization options to the game to the point that you can make parrying completely trivial. My only other complaint is I felt like they had a great opportunity to explore the backstory of the makers, which were kind of this mysterious group from the previous games. But I didn't really find any of these new supporting characters all that interesting. They're not as bad as another game we'll get to later on, but overall I just didn't really care what happened to them. Either way, I still love this game for what it is, and I hope Bethesda continues making single-player, first-person shooters down the line, because they're just so good at it. Like, this is so much fun to play. Next in the month of August, I finally got the chance to try out the Silent Hill 2 remake that came out last year. I was pretty skeptical whether anyone was going to be able to make a modern-day remake that was on par with the OG, but Team Bloober did a damn fine job here. It's by far one of the prettiest games I've played on PlayStation 5, and because of the fact that it looks so realistic, I think it really adds to the overall scare factor. In terms of the actual horror aspect, I think this game far outshines the original. There were so many tense moments that kept me extremely uncomfortable throughout the entire campaign. They also took a more realistic approach with the cutscenes and dialogue of the characters, which kinda works, but really, it never quite scratches the same itch of the dreamlike and nonsensical weirdness of the original. My only other complaint is that the actual dungeons feel a little too long to complete. The majority of these sections took roughly 20 minutes to complete in the original, and in this one they stretched out that time to be roughly 4 hours long, which at times just felt to be too much, especially if you end up replaying the game multiple times like I did. I also feel like they relied a bit too much on the mannequin leg enemy as well, because yeah, they're genuinely terrifying in this one, but I do feel like they overshadowed the nurses and the lion figures. Either way, props to this team for finally getting Silent Hill back in the limelight, and I can't wait to see what you guys do with Silent Hill 1. In September, I picked up Skyrim as part of my gameplay video in the Average High Skyrim Experience, and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I did run out of time on this one and couldn't really fully complete it, but I got the general gist of it. It's a classic for a reason. It does the fantasy setting really well. I just wish the combat was a little more engaging. I'm sure if you know what you're doing, you can make some insane builds that can make your character tear through enemies, but I will say I think this is much more playable on modern hardware now that the loading screens don't take forever just to load up a one-room house. I feel like this is one of those games that personally I have to be in the mood to play, but honestly, I totally understand the hype and I get why people love this game. This month I also played Enter the Gungeon, and I'm glad I finally did because this game is stupid addictive. As someone who's not a huge fan of bullet hell games, I found that this one's biggest strength comes from the insane amount of upgrades you can unlock and just how crazy and different they can make every run feel. I felt it was pretty easy to get frustrated in the first hours of the game, because as a newbie, you have to kind of rely on getting good weapons, which doesn't really happen until you start unlocking NPCs. There were many times the game would only give me what felt like joke weapons, and if I didn't pull a rare item, it would kind of kill the success of that run. But a good Gungeoneer would tell you it doesn't matter. You can still make a good run even if the game gives you the lowly pea shooter. It all just comes down to practice and good resource management. But like I said, this game really excels in the variety of weapons and upgrades that can make every run feel vastly distinct from one another. I just wish I was more into this genre, but unfortunately these types of games do make me feel like my eyes are bleeding. In the month of October, I finally caved, with the announcement that Kirby Air Riders, Metroid Prime 4, and above all, Hades 2. I couldn't ignore the Switch 2 any longer. So what do I think about Nintendo's newest console? I'm pretty much in the same boat as everyone else. This is the Switch 1, but does everything much better, and does feel on par with what we'd expect from a modern console of this generation. Do I support the obvious price gouging that Nintendo is doing with the console launch? Absolutely not. It's just a shame because it's not going to change until fans stop paying for the same slop that they release every year. I'm talking about that poopy looking Pokemon game that had DLC released before the game actually came out, and stuff like the Switch Welcome Tour. Like, don't make people pay money for that. The only reason they're charging for stuff like this is because they know they can get away with it. It's unfortunately the same mindset with Disney. Just because their brand is smacked onto the game case doesn't actually mean it's going to be better than any other type of media. But it is what it is. I'm happy with my purchase, and I'm excited to see what they do with a console that runs current generation hardware. Since I got the Switch 2, I finally got the chance to play Donkey Kong Bonanza, and whoo boy, I think this game is definitely worth the hype. Creating a video game where you can destroy the entire environment sounds like a developer's worst nightmare, but it just works here. I also really appreciated that the golden bananas felt like a worthy challenge to collect, as opposed to Mario Odyssey's moons, which could feel inconsistent and just downright tedious at times. If I had anything to complain about, it would probably be that DK doesn't feel as agile or have as much freedom when it comes to platforming as Mario. But I mean, hey, maybe that's the point, and they just kind of wanted to differentiate him from Mario. I just kind of wanted one extra move so that you could sequence break as easily as you could in Odyssey, but really, that's just me being nitpicky at this point. This is an amazing platformer with some great fan service, and I'm just really happy that this big ol' ape is back in the limelight. During the month of October, I also wanted to play a spooky game. Real original, I know. So I played Signalis, a sci-fi horror game that emulates the classic survival horror genre we've all come to know and love. There's a lot of games that have come out recently that replicate this style, but this one is by far the prettiest one I've seen, and gameplay-wise feels really good and not super janky. The story was a bit confusing for me to follow, but really that kind of feels like the whole point here. One day I'll have 2 hours to watch that whole ass video essay that Indie Explorer did. But yeah, this game really nails the PS1 style graphics, and even if I couldn't really understand the backstory, it's still really fun and a very tense survival horror game. If you have a hankering for old school Resident Evil and Silent Hill, this game really scratches that itch. And now for the busy month of November, I picked up Hades 2 and Kirby Air Riders on the same day. Because they came out on the same day. Why do you people do this to me? Let's start with Kirby Air Riders. I wasn't expecting much from this as I never played the original, but after watching Sakurai's directs, he really sold me on this. This game looks beautiful, has an amazing soundtrack, and I feel like it differentiates itself enough from Mario Kart to feel like its own thing. I love that the game only starts you with 4 characters and you have to unlock as you go. And when it comes to the actual unlocks, there is so much to be done here. Completionists have their hands full with this one. The amount of different vehicles you can ride adds a ton of options when it comes to racing, and the character stats add further customization when it comes to mixing and matching what playstyle works best for you. Even 20 hours in, I'm still finding new strategies and shortcuts on both standard races and city trial. I would say my only complaint is the story mode is a little too lengthy, but when I bought this game, I didn't even realize it would have a story mode, so that was a pleasant surprise as well. Playing online is also insanely fun and adds an extra layer of chaos. Really, I just wish more people were playing this game because some of those online lobbies can feel pretty empty at times. If you're going to choose any kart racer, pick this one as opposed to the ugly $80 monstrosity that's sitting over there. Next, let's talk about Hades 2. I am absolutely obsessed with this game, and I'm glad I kept myself in the dark until the official release. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty much the same as the original, but they made some changes to dashing and casts, which shakes up the core gameplay really well. I thought the weapons were kind of weird at first, but I slowly came around on them and found that they add a ton of replayability to every run. The story and the characters, so good. Supergiant, how do you manage to get these amazing voice actors for every single character? The dialogue feels like literal butter on my ears. I really don't know how else to describe it. And the soundtrack, oh my god, the soundtrack. I always had this huge grin on my face every time Olympus of Flame played. Or the really groovy Necropolis. You guys really outdid yourselves on this soundtrack. As I'm running this, I haven't technically beaten the game fully, but I have seen the vast majority of each area. And man, I just literally can't stop thinking about this game. It's constantly in the back of my mind, rent-free, and I am always yearning to play it over and over and over again. It's so freaking addicting. And last but not least, in the month of December, I picked up the highly anticipated Metroid Prime 4. And as a longtime Metroid fan, this is probably my most disappointing game of the year. Now don't get me wrong, I tried to ignore a lot of the hate that was being spread online about the empty desert and the quippy NPCs, and I wanted to really give this game the benefit of the doubt because I did feel like some people were overreacting. However, after actually playing the game, it seems pretty clear to me that Nintendo had no idea what they wanted this game to be, and all of the concerns that were being spread online were very legitimate. It's such a shame too, because I feel like you see glimpses of this beautiful world and you have an idea of what the game is going for, all just to have your experience interrupted by some random dweeb telling you where to go next for your destination. I will say the characters aren't necessarily other M bad, but good god, sometimes I really just wanted them to shut up. I wanted to roll my eyes into the back of my head every time I collected an upgrade and was met by an NPC going, "Phew, bet you needed that." Like, no, stop. Let me explore the world you made without the fucking peanut gallery in the background commenting on what I'm doing. Like, that's so weird. Coupled with the extremely boring desert overworld, lack of enemy variety in each biome, and the extremely linear level design, I feel like if the Metroid IP wasn't attached to this, no one would have paid any attention to it. Some developer interviews came out recently, and Retro admitted that they weren't allowed to ditch a lot of the ideas that were created from the previous studio, the Desert Hub world being one of them. I'm optimistic that they can make a good modern Metroid Prime game from scratch, but if it involves those terribly written NPCs, I'm all for just letting the Prime series die, and let's move on to something new for Metroid, because this just wasn't it. It's a shame I have to end on a sour note, but overall, I did enjoy the time that I've spent with the majority of the games here. If I had to pick a favorite, my game of the year for 2025 would definitely be Hades 2. This is a phenomenal sequel and expands on the amazing ideas of the first one. It was an extremely busy year, and unfortunately I didn't have time to get to every game that I wanted to play. Next year I'm definitely prioritizing games like Expedition 33, Ghost of Yotai, and Silksong. 2026 doesn't seem too packed yet, but I'm looking forward to the new Resident Evil in February, a new Coffee Talk game set in Tokyo, maybe GTA 6? Maybe? If you haven't already, check out the channel membership options, as you can see full unedited playthroughs of the games I've played for videos, some of which have not been released publicly on YouTube, alongside monthly polls that will allow you to vote on what topics I cover in future video essays. Either way, thank you for watching. I'll see y'all next year. And yeah, let's take a look at the Sony and Nintendo yearly wrapped. What up everybody, welcome to the Sony Wrapped. For whatever reason, Nintendo still hasn't released their yearly Wrapped, even though it's January 5th. So that's kind of weird, and I can't really wait to release this video until later in the month, so unfortunately we're going to have to skip the Nintendo Switch Wrapped. But either way, let's take a look at the Sony one real quick. I joined in 2014 when I bought a PS4. My level was 346. No big fucking deal. Moving on. Okay, so I spent the most hours in Metaphor. That makes sense. I knew it was either going to be between Darkest Dungeon and Metaphor. That makes sense. Metaphor is a long-ass game, especially if you want those master archetypes. Like, it takes forever to get those. Spent a lot of time in Darkest Dungeon. Doom the Dark Ages, Silent Hill 2. I'm surprised I spent more hours on Doom the Dark Ages. That's interesting. Yes, sirree. Moving on. I am a role player, which was the same as last year. Nothing really too exciting there. Moving on, I played for 434 hours. I think that's slightly less than last year. I think my time was 500 last year, so yeah, guess I gotta do a little more. Moving on, I do not want PlayStation Plus. I'm good. I earned a shit ton of trophies. So yeah, unfortunately they kind of skimped out on the monthly review. I did like that feature last year. I like to see like what I played most for certain months. But whatever, it is what it is, and no Nintendo Wrapped. I don't know what they're doing with that. But either way, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.